Thank you very much. I'd like to call this session of the Board of Revision to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 41st Nation in Treaty 3 territory. Today with me on the panel are Robert Malenke and Larry Robinson. I'll be chairing it. I am Mark Boreski. The assessor today is Victoria Ho, and the hearing secretary is Stephen Lunn. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing is concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. So we are hearing item number 4 on our docket today. Mr. Lunn, could you please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony?
Madam Assessor, please state your full name.
Victoria Ho.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Jared Story.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you very much.
So, Ms. Ho, when you are ready, could you provide us with your evidence, please?
All right. So, looking at roll number 120977422200, address is 191 Main Street. We're looking at the roll year of 2023, reference date of April 1st, 2021, at an assessed value of $6,144,000. This is currently has a restaurant building on this property with 1 story. We have the zoning of the overall parcel as multiple use. We have the land area as 57,000 square feet and 57,048 square feet. We have the overall plan area as 7,501. We have the gross floor leasable area as 8,500. We do not have the parking recorded on record. As we can continue on to page 3, we did receive a sales mailer from the current owner that we received during the reference period, and we also received a IME. Subject sale history. Registration went through December 24th, 2020 for consideration and sworn value of $6,650,000 with a sale price of $6,400,000. We go to my following page of page 4. I have a list of rent comparables of restaurants around the city that are fairly large. I tried to look for things that are over 5,000 square feet, but not exorbitantly large, like 10,000 square feet. So you can see that the rents are going between $20 to as much as $34. If you proceed to my next page, page 5, we have land comparable sales. We did add an adjustment for the excess land portion. So based off of 24,000 square feet, at $84.96 $84.96 per square foot. And if you look, there are properties these are sales of properties within the downtown with various different types of zoning. We do have comparables 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, which are zoned multiple use, just like our subject property. And it appears that our subject property is on the lower end of the comparables on a sale price per square foot. If you proceed to page 6, this is our workup based off of for our income stream workup for the subject property and how we calculated the estimated value of this assessment. There are 2 premises. One is the main restaurant at 7,500 square feet at $36.21. And we also have a mezzanine area at 999 square feet at $20.99. Overall estimate, we're looking at 6% vacancy loss, 3% expenses, $8 for shortfall, an overall capitalization rate of 6.4%, and then an additional adjustment for the excess land, which gives a final total of $6,144,000. Page 7 is pretty much a reiteration of page 6. We have a chart of capitalization rates on page 8. Municipal Assessment Act excerpts on page 9. Page 10 is an overall view of the subject property, an aerial view and a Google Street View. Page 11 and 12, and from that point is the response back from the owner that we received for the property. It states that month ending January 31st, 2021, the rental income for that 1 month is $24,999. And it's disclosed as a net rent. I guess they received rent from the Earls based off of 75,000 square feet. And then there's a net operating income of $13,799 for that month. If you look at page 13, it's with the Earls again, stating by the owner, it's monthly rent of $24,999 for the lease area of 7,500 square feet for the time of December 23, 2020 to December 23, 2022. And it's a net, it was disclosed as a net property rent. Oh wait, it's not net lease. It says net taxes are not included. We have a COVID questionnaire stating that there was significant impact of the property. And then we have the sales questionnaire for the property on page 17. So sale price of $6,650,000. That was paid for December 23, 2020. There is machinery and equipment included and furniture, or $200,000 for the machinery and equipment, and $200,000 for the machinery and equipment, $50,000 for the furniture, and then lease back for on line 6 for Earls occupying the restaurant for 1 year. And then there was no, and looking at further of the questionnaire response on page 18, there is no other disclosure. And then that is all I have for today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to be clear, we're not disputing the land rate today, so that land adjustment is accepted. We're just going to talk about the vacant restaurant building. So I'll proceed on that basis. Ms. Ho, when was the 2023 roll set?
When it was set?
Yes, and I suppose the reason I'm asking is, was this sale considered when the department determined the assessment for this property?
I don't remember. I am sorry.
Okay.
When I was
so you,
in a while.
do you know if the sale was considered in the model?
Most likely.
Okay, so even though, can we agree though, that by IAAO standards, we should proceed with caution with sales that include leasebacks, that include sale of a vacant premise, for one, and then the potential for assemblage or plottage. Would you agree with me that those sales, there would be a number of red flags with this sale in determining a market value? Maybe atypical. Would you agree?
I think that the sale may be typical because it is between, these are arm's length, it's an arm's length deal. There may be items that may be proposed. There may any large commercial property, there is always a development in mind for a potential investor. So it's just whether or not they're associated. I would say that we probably would probably disregard the sale.
If the parties were related, doesn't the sale and leaseback by its very nature indicate that these properties, that these folks are now partnering? The fellow who's purchasing is becoming the landlord of the vendor, correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? I can't hear you.
Yes. In a sale and leaseback, such as what we have here, the purchaser is in fact becoming the landlord to the vendor. That's the nature of a sale and leaseback. Is that not correct?
Yes.
So those parties are related. Okay. I just want to point that out. And then also, as we know, the vendor owns a separately assessed parcel north of this site, which was also, it's not included in the sale, but the first right of refusal is considered here. Would that not also raise a red flag?
It was not disclosed in the sales questionnaire, therefore it was not, the department was not made aware. If there was a right of first refusal, do you know how, I'm sorry, that's a counter, I shouldn't be asking a question or back, but if there's right for first of refusal, what would the value be? It was not disclosed in the questionnaire.
Precisely. It makes it difficult to determine a market value. So I guess my point is that this sale with all of these red flags, would this not be considered a sale that you would, if you were to indeed use it, would you not have to proceed with extreme caution based on your own IAAO standards? given the non-realty items, given the sale and lease back, and given the what we'll call a future transaction and the relationship between the parties, would that not give you some pause in determining if this was a typical market transaction?
I think honestly, I think this might be we should proceed with caution for the sale. However, I think this is a very strong sale that indicates market value of this property. 6.65 million is a lot more than 6.144 million. And it's already been discounted quite a bit. If you take 6,650,000 less of the chattels, which is 250,000, less the lease back, which was supposed to be for 1 year, and it's supposed to be based off of one year for 7,500 square feet. And they're using, let's say, on a high end of a market value, high end for a chain restaurant like Earl's, Moxie's, or Great Canadian Brew House is $35 a square foot, or $30 a square foot. Let's go on the high end, $35 a square foot. That would make it an annual lease back of, let's see, 35. That would be $262,535 for just a 1 year lease back.
Right. No, so I understand the mathematics. I suppose I'm asking if we also have plottage or assemblage, that leads to future developments as well, right? And we've accepted the value of the land, but it makes it very difficult. And I'm just concerned that there are so many assumptions that we have to make that they may become distorted. But I think I've covered that. So let's get to the actual workup. You're suggesting that, I think I heard you say that or maybe you didn't, but is this all model derived, the entire workup?
I think it's model derived. I don't believe this one has been reviewed.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Okay. But these rent comps were selected presumably by yourself, so we can speak to them?
Yes, I did select the rent comps.
Okay. Can we agree that they're all smaller than the subject?
Give me a second. I will take a look. Yeah, they are. They're smaller than the subject. Yeah.
Okay. And can we agree that none of these are downtown?
Yes, we can agree that they're not in downtown. However, one of the properties is an Earl. One of the comparables is an Earl's. It's at 30, and they're renting for $31 a square foot.
I'm sorry, which one is that? Is that
1515 Portage?
Okay, and that's actually, let's just say, a pad lease as part of the larger Polo Park site. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if that one has a pad lease.
Okay, but it's outside of the EQ3 basically. Or in that kind of general part of the Polo Park site. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe it's part of the Polo Park site.
Okay. Now the first four, just want to deal with very quickly. I see here, and can we agree that the first one is the Pancake House?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The second one is also a chain, I believe. Is it not?
The second one is 1475 Henderson. That's Boston Pizza.
Right. So that's a chain restaurant, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And then, okay. So that's fine. Now, those first two, when I look at the lease starts and the effective year built, they're exactly the same. So yep. Were these properties built to suit? And do you suppose that there may be some, is the lease a function of the cost to construct, do you suppose?
Honestly, I can't really hear you very well. I'm sorry.
Oh, is anyone else having trouble hearing me?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Occasionally, yes. A little bit of trouble.
Oh, okay. I'll speak louder. So my question, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Ho, is the first four, effectively, the effective year built
Yep.
and the lease start are on the same year. Now, I know, I believe this to be true of number one at a minimum, but Ms. Ho, those rents, are those built to suit buildings? And does the lease rate potentially consider the built cost of the asset?
Excuse me, I'd like to interrupt for just a second here. Where do I see the year built? I'm looking at page 4, and I'm seeing
4?
lease start.
Yes,
EYB.
there's a column that says EYD, and it's right next to net
Oh, okay. Thank you.
net rent square foot.
All right.
Yeah, so the effective year built for those first four, and the lease term starts in the same year. So, sorry to keep asking this, but do you know if potentially that lease rate considers the cost to build the physical asset? That's typical.
From what I'm aware of, I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine. The one on Keniston is fine. Can we agree that these are on some level? Well, I mean, they're certainly all chain restaurants, except for maybe number 3, correct?
Probably number 3 and number 4.
Okay, so 4, that's a former gas bar that was scraped and remediated and rebuilt. Is that correct?
Yes, and then it's turned into a strip mall.
Right. And it's all restaurants in that strip mall. So I wasn't sure which unit it was. Oh, it's Unit D. Okay. So but that's not a chain, you're saying?
No, that's not a chain.
Okay. All right.
It's the largest restaurant of the 4.
Right. Okay. All right. That's fine. And one other question: do any of these restaurants in your comps, do any of them have mezz space?
I'm not too sure.
Do any of them have basements?
Again, I'm not too sure.
Okay. Okay. But just to be clear, the range here runs from, let's say, $30 to $34, correct?
Correct.
For predominantly suburban chains, but for our property, the model has applied $36.21. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the property was empty at the reference date, correct? It was vacant.
Correct, but that was, I believe that was because of forced closures from the province. However, they did not go out of business and vacated the property. They did come back and did rent that space.
And they were overholding on a lease back, correct?
Pardon?
They were on a lease back, so effectively they were on a short-term lease back, and it was known to the market that they would be vacated, correct? It was in the papers, and we knew that they were moving to 300 Main, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So when it says high-quality restaurant, why does it say high-quality restaurant as opposed to, say, standard chain or some other such code that we've seen before for this property and certainly for the comps?
Because it has a lounge and it does cater to a more upscale clientele in comparison to, let's say, a McDonald's, or in comparison to in comparison to what would be another a small Chinese food restaurant.
Okay, but can we agree at the very least that at its present physical condition,
based off of the comparables that I provided and compared to the rent that was generated by the model, I am suggesting it's a little high.
Okay, that's fine. And then further to that, I asked about the mezz space. Now, typically, can we agree in a restaurant like this mezz space would be sort of for, call it for manager's office, that sort of thing?
Probably.
Okay, and so that model generated rent of $20.99, is it fair to say that in a market transaction, the market doesn't consider that space? Is that fair?
Most likely.
And indeed for our owner today, he's stated that it's 7,500 square feet. So he's, just further to my point, he's not included that mezzanine space as leasable, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's fine. So those are my questions on your rent, and I thank you. Now, in terms of the expenses for the non-recoverables, is it safe to assume that the city has not provided anything in evidence for the panel or the taxpayer to consider with regard to non-recoverables?
I did not provide that today, no.
Okay, and can we agree, though, that just restaurants as a subsector of retail typically have longer leases than other retail participants? Is that fair?
Correct. That is fair to say.
Okay, and with a longer lease, a leasing commission paid to a realtor would typically be higher than, just mathematically. Can we agree on that?
I believe so.
Okay. The cap rate is modeled?
Correct.
Okay, so, and I'm going to be very careful, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to talk about previous assessments or decisions, but the model in the previous cycle applied a cap rate that was about 110 basis points higher. Now, is that not, do you not think that's out of sorts with the market in terms of what we know about what was going on with restaurants at April 1 of 2021?
So here's the thing with COVID, especially, and with people with excessive amounts of money and investors, especially when they had cheap financing from the banks, they had access to cheaper financing. So therefore, properties overall across the board were looking really good to put in as a real estate investment. It's not just retail that's showing a big increase, like decrease in their cap rate. It's just indicating that there was a stronger market for long-term investment in real estate.
Okay, so at the reference date, though, interest rates were at a historic low. And that was based on, the emergency measures by the Bank of Canada to ward off. Well, it was an emergency measure based on COVID. It was not market driven; it was policy driven. Can we agree on that at a minimum?
But even if it's policy driven, it still affects the entire market.
Okay, and do you suppose that lenders were suggesting that a 2% interest rate was durable, or do you think that they baked that into their lending rate based on the fact that they knew that was an emergency measure?
Even then, they already knew a lot of, if you're lending, a lot of them you have to meet a certain level of tolerance before you could be approved for financing.
No, I understand that, but if you're suggesting that, okay, no, that's fine. Can we agree though that generally, when I look at your retail study, not study, but rather your chart, can we agree that as a subsector of retail, that restaurants, even in good times, represent a riskier investment overall than other retail opportunities? Do you think that's fair to say?
I would say that yes, but however, restaurants they may be riskier. However, they have an easier usually have a lower fee for entry into a market in comparison to other retail sectors. So you can pick up a small restaurant business or cafe and put in, let's say, $100,000, and you're set and ready to go. But in comparison to like getting a let's say a gas station, you have to find a prospective a gas station to be a gas station owner, or you have to know someone to do that, or to become a retailer of a store, you have to have a large amount of stock.
Okay, can we agree that in the restaurant business, the margins are extremely low and the failure rate is extremely high? It's a general rule.
Originally, well, I'm not too sure about now, but back when I was working in a restaurant, margins were 30%. And if you're smart, failure rate is not that bad. If you're able to survive past 5 years, your business is successful.
Right, because most restaurants fail within the first 5 years, correct?
Correct. That's
Okay,
why you have your 5-year lease and then the option to renew.
Right. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Belenky, do you have questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Robinson, do you have questions?
I have no questions for the assessor, no.
I do. On the most recent point that was being discussed, and that being the length of the leases and the cap rate, if the leases for restaurants tend to be on the longer side compared with the rest of retail, are investors looking at what their risk level is over a longer period of time, similar to the fact that they're looking at longer leases? I guess what I'm getting at is, if leases are for a longer period of time, and an investor assumed, or did the investor assume, that the COVID impact would be relatively short term, does that mean that their level of risk they want to assume is reflective of just the period of the pandemic, or is it reflective of a longer period, consequently smoothing out essentially the level of risk?
So the cap rate should be in regards to the overall long-term projection. You're buying a real estate property. You're buying something that lasts, well, at least the parcel will last forever. The building, not so much.
Okay, next question. The mezzanine, was it not part of the lease?
What was indicated from, I have not seen the actual lease, but what's indicated on the income and expense mailer, it appears that the mezzanine was not included.
And therefore was not used?
It is used. It's probably not, it's just part and parcel. This is the overall area. They're just doing but they probably have care and control of all 4 walls of that property.
What use was made of the mezzanine?
I'm not too sure. Mezzanines can be used as storage or as offices, or it could be a foyer.
Okay. So on your rent comparables, am I correct in seeing that they are lower than generally speaking, than the modeled amount that is applied to this subject? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is that to any extent reflective of a difference between suburban and downtown properties? Or all of these are not in the downtown. So I'm trying to figure out if we've got apples and oranges here or not. What, generally speaking, would the difference be between suburban and downtown rents?
I was trying to aim for a similar type of franchise restaurant that Earl reflects. So from what I can tell, it's negligible. However, if you're looking at even more upscale restaurants like Highs or the new Earls, the rents are a lot higher because there's a significant amount of improvements in that area. either it's a new building or it's or it's just that prestigious.
Okay. There was mention of the sale. Am I right in understanding that it closed and then reopened after the sale? Is that correct history or not?
I believe so.
And the original owner is related to the purchaser?
No, it's not related to the purchaser. He's just, so Mr. Story is just trying to indicate that the sale is most likely not valid because there's a vested interest in the lease back. However, it's part of their agreement in the sale price to have a lease back to probably stay while Earl's is occupying that space. They'll wait until their new location on the new Main Street on the Artist Building is finally ready and open.
Okay. So what does that do to the sale price? Does it make it higher or lower than it would otherwise be?
It'll be a little. So I did a quick calculation of the so based off the 600. I'm sorry, I can't even talk. 6,650,000. Based off less the chattels, so 250,000. Less $35 a square foot at 7,500 square feet, which would be 262,535. You get a final overall total of 6,137,000. So it's roughly very close to our assessed property value right now that we're discussing.
Okay. And you and Mr. Story have no disagreement on the land, so I won't bother asking any questions about that. Okay, that's all my questions. Then, Mr. Story, could we have your evidence, please?
Yes, thank you very much. And just while it's top of mind, Mr. Chair, I just want to point out that the calculation that the assessor's done a couple times here is not considering the topside economic potential for land assembly into the future. So that's another reason, just so we're very, very clear, why we don't believe that this sale should be considered in the assessment as a true market transaction. But I just want to make sure that while that's hanging in the air, that we deal with it.
Okay, well, let me ask you the question then. If you think that's the case,
yes,
yet you are agreeing to the land value.
Yes.
Is assemblage a reflection of the amount that is not the land, that is the building itself?
To be clear, sir, there's another parcel that is not yet transacted to the north of this.
Yeah.
And and you're absolutely correct, we are not disputing the land value under question today. However, there is a separately assessed, it's a separate parcel to the north of this that is owned by Earls. That will transact at some point. The owner has the first right of refusal. So there is an economic opportunity, and I don't believe that there's a way to put a dollar value on that future development of that plottage, of that assemblage. That's pointed out in the IAAO standards by which the assessor is governed. So it's not simply enough to take the lease back out and then to take the chattels out. We have to consider that that this fellow is also purchasing a future economic opportunity, which makes it atypical of market. So that's my point. Okay. So here we are.
Before you carry on.
Yes.
Before you carry on. I'm looking at the aerial photos in the assessor's brief. Sorry, I mean, this is going a little bit out of order here, but I just want to stick with what you were saying there. So there is land to the north that may be assembled with land that has been associated with the Earl's restaurant, whether that is surplus land, excess land, whichever it might be.
Correct.
Is that parcel that you're referring to the north, on which is a separate roll entry, is it currently under appeal?
Oh, good question. I'm not sure. I do not know. I don't know.
I believe it was under appeal.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It was under appeal, and that appeal has been heard? Is that correct? Ms. Hope?
Please give me one moment.
Sure.
And then I can verify. It appears to be it was under appeal, but it has been withdrawn.
Good. That makes it easier. For you and for Mr. Story, I'm very reluctant to deal with an appeal on a parcel where there is a related property of related financially also under appeal without dealing with the two of them at the same time because of that relationship. So that's why I was asking the question.
There are different owners, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, though, that's the issue. So, okay, but yes.
In that case,
yeah, proceed.
Carry on.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we've established that we're at 191 Main. We all know this as the former Earls. I want to be very, very clear. The present physical condition is that this building is vacant. It's currently being redemised for a new tenant. The new tenant is not a chain restaurant. It's not a suburban restaurant. The covenant is much, much different. It is certainly a local restaurateur, and he's opening a second restaurant, and it will be let's call it a maritime style pub. Those are the reports that we're seeing, but it is not an Earl's. The last report we have, and this is in the media, is that they're hanging the drywall. So I just want to make sure we're very clear. You can see on my this will be page 2 of my report, but it's boarded and it's being prepped for new occupancy. So I want to be very, very clear about that. The leasable area. Now we're talking about everything that is there, and even though in the eyes of the market, this is a 7,500 square foot restaurant, there is indeed a mezzanine. Typically, Ms. O is absolutely correct. Typically in a restaurant, a mezzanine is used either for storage or for an office of some sort, perhaps a manager's office. When I worked in a restaurant, that was sort of the case. In this case, we've used even though the market would not necessarily put a value on it, we've used a rent that equates to half of the main floor. That's a typical practice that we use, and I believe it's BOMA standard would suggest that if there's a finished space, that you have to assess what is there, even if the market treats it differently. So it's sort of an interesting scenario. I've provided you with rental comps on page 13. Now I apologize, the effective age, I overwrote that, so it adjusted numerically, but I did send a correction in. So you should all have that. But as you can see, these are a number of chain restaurants too, and some locals, recognizing, of course, the most likely use going forward. We mentioned, or the assessor mentioned, highs. They are in there on Lombard. That's indices 6. And just despite the fact that the assessor mentioned that the rent would be extremely high, it is indeed $28.50. So it's not extremely high, and it's certainly not higher than what the assessor is proposing here today. In terms of proximity, we have Forks Market Road. Face rent there, that's the Spaghetti Factory. So that's high traffic, very similar location. It does benefit from let's call it events downtown, but it's not on the Skywalk, Mr. Chair, and that's that's a very, very important part of downtown restaurants. You made a very good point, or asked a very good question regarding the delta between suburban restaurants and downtown restaurants. I would suggest to you that the restaurants that do particularly well in the downtown of this size, for example, of these types of chains, we can all envision them, they're on the skywalk. They benefit from Jets games, events, concerts, that type of thing. So we see the Forks indices on number 9. That's a $29 or $30 face rent. However, it is semi-gross. When we net it out, it's $14.17. So I can go through all of these if you like, but typically they are the Applebee's, the brew houses. I think the assessor mentioned the brew house. They're in at $31 on Keniston. Ultimately, the average of our rents that we've provided here today are $28.17. Now, I think that Forks rent brings things down, but I did want to include it just to give you a sense, approximately on a minimal basis. But the median sort of evens things out, and that's $30 per square foot. So that's what we've used. Now, again, the tenant who we know is going in is not a chain restaurant. The covenant is not strong. It's certainly not like an Earl's who have 69 shops across Canada. This is a local operator opening a second establishment. So we think we're being quite reasonable by using $30 on the main. That's 7,501 square feet. That's as assessed. And again, a half rent to the mezzanine space, though the market doesn't treat it as having any contributory value. Ultimately, our blended rent over 8,500 square feet becomes $28.24. And again, that is based on $30 a foot on the main floor. I think that's reasonable. In terms of vacancy, we're not disputing the 6%, even though the restaurant is vacant. We're suggesting that over the life of the asset, 6% is reasonable. And similarly, the shortfall rate is not in dispute. In terms of the non-recoverables, we've provided all of you with our non-recoverable expense study. Mr. Chair, would you like me to go through this, or are we satisfied with the arguments, or how would you like me to proceed? It's sort of lengthy. I can hit the high points if that
Panel
helps.
members, what is your wish? Mr. Blanky?
I'd like to hear another review of what he said.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much. So again, we've provided you with our study of the Altus Group non-recoverable expense study. And just to give you a little background, sir, in previous cycles, there was no dispute about non-recoverable expenses. Both the city and Altus agreed that a standard erosion to the effective gross income of 7% was appropriate. Typically, it was broken down by 2% as a structural reserve. It's typical in real estate, obviously, as a fund, and 5% for what we're calling non-recoverable expenses. They're not management fees; they are separate and apart. They are fees that are borne by an owner that are never recovered from the tenant in the what we'll call the competent ownership, management, and subtending of the income that keeps an income property going. So again, they are simply non-reimbursed costs. In some years, they will be very high. In some years, they may be so low that they almost don't exist. And we don't want to have assessments that effectively look like a roller coaster. So we want to stabilize that allowance over the useful or effective economic life of the asset. Again, that had not been in dispute until the 2020 assessment cycle. In the 2020 assessment cycle, the assessor reduced that allowance to 2%. In this cycle, it's now 3%. We have maintained a consistent position that 7% is appropriate. And just to give you a background, in the past, the way that the city actually talked about the non-recoverables, they said that, and this is a quote, even with net leases and competent management, there still will be expenses incurred by the landlord that are non-recoverable from the tenants. Examples of these are processing payments and chasing bad debts. That's from the former city manual. They also note that the NOI, the net operating income, is equivalent to the potential annual net rent minus vacancy plus other income less non-recoverable operating expenses. This is appropriate. It's consistent with principles rooted in appraisal and valuation theory. and the appraisal course material from UBC states as much. The most important non-recoverable cost items to be aware of are space marketing costs, which includes inducements and leasing costs. Now, we do not consider inducements. We are not talking about tenant inducements. We're simply pointing out that the literature does imply that these are the most important. I mentioned commissions, and of course, at a time when your property is vacant and you have an agent going to the market to recruit a new tenant for you, there's going to be a very high commission cost. But that's one part of it, and that is stabilized again, as I mentioned, into the effective useful life of the asset. Our submission also points out other jurisdictions in Canada. Winnipeg or Manitoba does not have a jurisdictional exemption. We simply, this is a decision that was made by the assessment department in Winnipeg, but we do point out that Saskatchewan and Ontario, they use the same methodology that we've typically used. Now, in order to support our study, and as we've done in the previous cycle and in this cycle, we've provided you with a study. And effectively what we've done is we've looked at statements from the years 2018 through 2020 with a sampling of properties with consideration to leasing commissions, professional fees, asset management fees, and advertising and space marketing costs. So when we exclude the TIs, the average is 6.64%, and the median is 5.98. And of course, when we include TIs, it goes much higher. It's between 8.6 and 10.6. Now, these results that we've found this cycle are very similar to the research experiment that we conducted last cycle. So we feel very, very comfortable that our request of 5% is fully supported by our submission here today. And of course, the 2% that we've dedicated to the structural allowance is supported both by the market and by our study. Finally, just to point this out, our cap rate derivations, you provided a separate study called the Altus 2023 Retail Capitalization Rate Study. All of our cap rate derivations include the 5% non-recoverables. So if for any reason you believe that the reinstatement of the 5% non-recoverable is not appropriate in this instance, I do ask that the cap rate that you apply in your decision reflect that. And typically, when we remove the 5%, the average adjustment is about 35 basis points upward. So if you don't believe that the 5% ought to be included, we do recognize that the cap rate that we're suggesting here today is inclusive of that 5%. So that's our sort of greatest hits on the non-recoverables. I guess I'll leave your questions for the end unless you'd like to jump in here, or may I proceed?
Mr. Belenky?
The cap rate that you're proposing, what was the amount you're looking at?
Sure.
Well, let's just relate the questions at this point to the non-recoverable expenses discussion rather than specifically the cap rate.
Oh, okay.
Do you have any questions about the non-recoverable?
No questions on the applicant on that aspect, on the recovery.
Okay. Mr. Robinson, do you have any questions about what Mr. Story had to say about non-recoverable expenses?
I do, just one.
Sure.
Did you say that in the previous assessment cycle, the non-recoverable expense of 5% that you suggested was accepted by the city?
7% in total. So
I'm afraid you've frozen up there.
5 and 2. In 2020, the city changed 2% for structural. In 2020, the city used 2% as a general expense ratio. And in this cycle for 2023, they're using 3%. There's no submission here. I don't know exactly how that's derived, but we are using 7%. And yes, sir, you are absolutely correct. In the previous cycles prior to 2020, that figure was accepted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If you'd like to carry on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So just very, very quickly, the remaining portion of our work up here is the cap rate. So I've mentioned, and I think we've had a pretty good discussion about the risk profile of restaurants as a subset of restaurant or of retail. I note that in the previous cycle, our analysis, obviously it's a different reference date, but we had applied a 7.25 cap and the city used 7.5. So now we're in a scenario where we're suggesting that the economic picture, the risk profile, clearly the cap rate is in a large part the numerical assessment of risk. It does speak to the durability of income, the strength of the covenant should be considered there. We're no longer dealing with an Earls as our tenant. We're now dealing with what we'll call an independent fellow. So it's a little different. The strength of covenant is weakened by any stretch of the imagination. And clearly the restaurant universe has changed. Now, I believe Ms. Ho had mentioned that you're actually buying the real estate and you should be looking at the life, and that's true, and I agree with that. However, I suppose there's a theoretical question here, and we have to think about COVID and is it an event that just happened and everything will go back to normal, or will there be lingering effects of this pandemic going forward? Will we see more people ordering online, for example? Will we see less people dining out? Will we see pandemics in the future? I don't know, but what I can tell you is that the restaurant subsector, every person working or owning properties in hospitality can tell you that that was the sector that was hit the hardest, to be certain. So it would be illogical to see 110 basis points in cap rate compression, cycle over cycle, for the restaurant subsector. It doesn't make sense. We've adjusted to 7.5%. Consistent with previous submissions, we think this is reasonable. So ultimately, Mr. Chair, our income value on the restaurant alone, the vacant building that is currently being tenanted up for a new occupier, is calculated as $2,743,215. We don't dispute that adjustment for the parking at $2,040,000. So our total value then becomes $4,783,215, rounded to $4,783,000. I assume you'll ask me about that sale. I don't believe that sale is typically would be considered a market sale. We wouldn't use it in a study. I don't think the assessor would either. So we've not considered it in coming to our value here today. So we are suggesting respectfully that the value should not exceed $4,783,000. If not to put too fine a point on this, but I've also included a document from StatsCan. It's StatsCan COVID-19 Data to Insights for a Better Canada. It's the impact of COVID-19 on food services and drinking places. First quarter of 2021. It was released in March 18 of 2021, and it tells you much of what we're talking about. Restaurateurs are taking in mass amounts of debt, employment, the ability to actually staff these restaurants had dropped substantially. So there were severe impacts. I won't belabor this, but it is there for your perusal in support of our adjusted cap rate. And I think I will leave it there. And with that, I thank you.
Very much. Ms. Ho, questions?
So if the real estate or the restaurant sector was not, I understand it was the most hardest impacted property type of all of the retail properties. However, this gentleman, I believe that this owner, if you could correct me, is still a restaurateur. He owns another restaurant. He's still going further into buying another property to go develop another restaurant. So is he still? There's still optimism. If not for going into the restaurant business.
So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So this owner has been fairly vocal during the pandemic. It's the owner from the King's Head, and he's talking about how extremely difficult it's been. So
And he's able
no, I would not say that he's
for over
optimistic. I
$6
would say
million
that,
for this property.
well, that's not the purchaser. He's the tenant. So
He's the tenant.
there's a purchaser who may develop that space, that land that we talked about, and the covenant, the tenant that he's got is somebody who's a restaurateur. So I wouldn't say that this is tantamount to a great deal of let's say optimism in the restaurant space. I would suggest to you that the purchaser likely has a motivation for development potential in the long term, but that is a moot point based on the fact that we're accepting the land. If we're just talking about the restaurant, what I'm suggesting to you is the rents that the model has applied are too high, and the cap rate compression does not bear any relation to what's happening in the real world as of the reference date for the hospitality sector. And I think we agree on that. So I suppose that's my answer.
Also, for your comparable number 6, the one on Lombard, the highs, are you aware that that is an overall blended rental rate that is also including a basement rent? Yes.
Have you ever been in that basement? It's gorgeous. That's where they have many functions. That's not an unfinished basement. That's a very high quality space.
Mm-hmm.
And it has an elevator.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that it is a blended rental rate. As an
Sure.
indicator.
Yeah, and to be fair, so I'm using it because the proximity of it is good. I don't think we're seeing $36 on these, but again, I do think that $30 for this new venture is reasonable.
Okay. So now regarding the right first right of refusal for a property, it's high. First, the value of that first right is highly subjective and is highly dependent on each case scenario. Correct?
Precisely. Yes, precisely, and that's why it would be erroneous, in my opinion, to use the purchase price without consideration to that what we'll call a future economic opportunity.
Is there has the owner disclosed or provided evidence on how much he valued the first right of refusal?
No, again, I'm putting very little weight on the sale. When I see a lease back, that raises a red flag to me. When I see an estimate of the value of chattels, that raises a red flag to me. So I suppose it's a methodological issue here, but I've chosen to take an income approach to determine the value as opposed to, I don't know how the city has come to their value, but I'm using a pure income approach based on market.
So okay. All right, that's all the questions I have for today. Thank you.
Mr. Belenky, do you have questions?
I have no questions of the applicant. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
I do. The property to the north of the restaurant, that's the parking lot.
Well, it's there's a parking lot and then there's another parking lot.
Okay, there's two. I couldn't tell from the map where that ended. Two parking lots.
There are two parking. So currently, I'll show you on this map. So it's sort of hard to see. I've tried to capture it here. I don't know what they call it now. This used to be the Thompson New Media Building. That's their parking.
Yeah.
This is the other parking that is separately assessed. It's been owned by girls.
Okay.
And then this is the restaurant parking, and then this is the surplus land. Okay. So presumably the restaurant has more parking than it needs. The assessor is suggesting that we ought to add a surplus value, and we're fine with that. But over and above that, there's another parcel that is on a different roll that is not transacted at this stage. So that's where presumably if you took the surplus land plus that other roll, you would be able to develop it into some other higher and better use.
So the new owner of Earls may not necessarily need that. He's got the right of first refusal, I understand, but he doesn't really need that. There's enough
So he's
parking.
the owner of the building and the landlord to the new tenant. Earls is now on at 300 Main. So Earls is out of the picture.
Yeah.
But they still maintain that piece of land.
Okay.
So that's, yeah, so
It's their first right of refusal.
it's the purchaser's
It is.
first right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. But he doesn't necessarily need it because he's got enough parking. So
Well, it's
if the price is good and he wants it in future development.
in the future, and we agree that the value of that land is high. We're not
Right.
disputing that $85 a foot. That's
Yeah.
fine. But what we're saying is, if you have that parcel of land in the future, and now just if we want to sort of go down this road, in the past, Earls actually tried to redevelop their site, and property planning and development said no. They have a vision, they have a plan for this stretch of Main, and they want nothing less than a 3-story office or multifamily. I don't know what the desire is now. I presume it's something with more density. So I suppose one of the reasons why I think that market sale is, even though he doesn't need it necessarily for parking for the restaurant operations now, there likely is some higher or better use in the future with greater density for development. So, and Ms. Ho is absolutely correct. How do you put a value on that? Well, it's hard to. So that's why you should defer to a market position as opposed to a sale that includes a future opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
One more question. When it was Earls,
Yeah.
was that mezzanine floor just used for like an office?
I believe it was office. It may be storage, but I believe it's office. I believe it would be a manager's office.
Wasn't it VIP
No.
areas?
No.
Jets
No.
could walk to it.
No, if you remember that space, it has, I think, 22 foot ceilings or something like that. And it was just kind of a general open space, but that would be, and that 999 square feet, it would be either, I think it's office, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
With respect to the cap rate,
Yes.
you're correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was you're saying that a relatively high cap rate is required here, given that this is not a chain that is in here, and there is some greater risk.
Precisely. That's the strength of covenant. So the
Yep.
the strength of covenant is typically something that we look at. So I mentioned like a McDonald's or something like that, but McDonald's has a very, very strong covenant. Earls has a very, very strong covenant. They have 69, 70 stores, something like that across Canada. The fellow who's coming in now, this is his second operation. And so in terms of the strength of covenant, yes, that would be a higher risk profile, to be certain.
And the second part of my question is, this is an independent. It was stated earlier on that the highest rate of failure is within the first 5 years. Do independents fail more frequently within those 5 years than chains?
I would assume so, but I don't have anything to support that. But I mean, that would.
Okay. So then, if we're looking at
logical to me.
a hypothetical purchaser of the property at the reference date, wouldn't that person potentially assume that although right now there is a lease in place for someone who is an independent, if that person fails, or even at the end of that lease, is it impossible that a chain would come back?
No, it's not impossible. Although I guess I want to be careful that we don't talk about post-reference issues, but I think that, if a chain would come back, I think what we've seen from chains, I suppose the best predictor of future behaviors is past behavior. And we've seen this chain move across the street, a few hundred meters. And a big part of this was they were unhappy with, they were unable to redevelop that building. And they showed a desire to be on the skywalk. I think I mentioned that earlier. And I think that makes sense. And there's underground parking. There are a number of factors, and we've seen. The WOW group, they're coming to 201, so that's not quite a chain, but certainly a local multi property owner. I think I think that it's not impossible, but I think the desire typically would be to be on the skywalk. That gives you access to the foot traffic from the towers, and then it also gives you the ability to access, again, events at the arena, which is typically, those are very busy nights when you're downtown.
Mm-hmm. To what extent, in your experience, does ease of parking matter when prospective customers want to access a restaurant?
I think it's very, very very important, and I think that Earls in their previous iteration did well because of that. I think having that parking is good. Yeah, I think that's positive.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Ms. Ho, would you like to summarize?
Yes, please, thank you. So I do believe that the sale is relevant to today's hearing. In regards to that, it was not provided that there was no disclosure about the right of first refusal of the property. The property is still functioning and well operated. Even if you do calculate regarding the less of the actual sale price and do the appropriate adjustments, it does support the overall assessment, the current assessment value. If you do look at my income workup, my rental rate for the 7,500 square feet main floor is a little high. However, it is blended with the 999 square feet mezzanine space. I do believe that overall, seeing a prospective owner, that landlord that's thinking of purchasing a property in the long term, that the cap rate is justified as they are thinking of it in the long term setting, and they have been getting a bit of income during their ownership. Thank you very much. I also would like to indicate that I don't believe that over $1 million for first valuing over $1 million for first right of refusal is quite high. But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Story.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So just to summarize very quickly, the IAAO standards, I reviewed it before I came in. The assessor has first of all, the assessor has the burden of proof in this hearing to prove that they are correct. They also, when they see a sale such as this, they have the opportunity to follow up with the purchaser to learn of any sort of issues that may be influencing that sale. To our knowledge, they did not. The sale price it raises so many red flags that I do not believe that we should defer to it. Further to that, the assessor has not provided anything to support the 3% for the non-recoverables, nor have they provided any sales to support the cap rate that they've modeled here today. Now, and just and again, not to put too fine a point on this, but suggesting that the hospitality sector has, with regard to this property on a site-specific basis, should be applied a downward adjustment of 110 basis points. There's no reality to what we're seeing in the market. So I just want to point that out very quickly and leave you with that. And I agree, Ms. Ho, the rents that have been applied here are too high on both the main floor and on the mezzanine. And I thank you all for your time today.
Thank you very much. So that concludes today's hearing. Thank you for appearing. We will be deliberating shortly, and then we will send out our orders as quickly as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.